are listening to WPVM 103.7 on your dial and at WPVMFM.org globally. I am your host, Crystal Salinas MacKinnon, and today I'm joined by Fletcher, North Carolina Sitting Councilman and mayoral candidate Preston Blakley. So welcome, Preston, and thank you so much for sitting down to talk with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to hear about your story and your campaign, but can we first just start off talking about some basics about Fletcher, such as the demographics? So like when I was researching your campaign and Fletcher is maybe the least Black place ever. And yet you are the youngest member ever elected to council. And of course you are Black. Fletcher also currently has a Black mayor. Was he the first Black mayor?
Yes, he's definitely the first Black mayor. And I was you're gonna ask another question?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, he was the first Black mayor. He was elected in 2017. I'm incredibly thankful for him and starting in local government, because I feel like he was able to pave the way to open up other candidates, not just me, but other candidates this year to run for Fletcher Town Council or to be the mayor of Fletcher. I mean, that was something that was unseen in the history of Fletcher. So to have a Black mayor and a Black council member, so we're 2/5 Black right now. I mean, that's not even representative of Fletcher, but it's incredible that we're here when we have such a low Black population. I think the new census data just came out. I think we're like 5% or something like that. And I think Latinx folk are a little bit more than that. So it's pretty incredible that we're here right now.
Yeah. Was he the first Black council member?
Yes, technically. I mean, he's on council. So, but he's the first Black mayor and the first council member.
So did he go straight to the mayor's seat? Is that he wasn't like a sitting councilman before he became the mayor? Okay, that's what I was just trying to.
Yeah. Mayor Whiteside, he sat on the Parks and Rec board, I believe, before running for mayor.
Okay. So some other kind of like standout things about Fletcher that really just continue to make this whole situation more fascinating are home ownership rates are really high, like 80%, roughly. Median income is well above North Carolina average. I think it's about $79,000 per household, which is, well above the average, well above Asheville average. Obviously, as we discussed, Fletcher is almost wholly white, and it sways conservative. The vote in the last presidential election, pretty overwhelmingly went for Donald Trump. So how do you, and then of course you're being on the council also due to your age. All these things combined make this very historic. So how do you explain this, or how do you view this schism between the demographics of your town as compared to this sort of oddly progressive trend in local politics?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's a combination of things. I think when I ran in 2019, it was truly a grassroots campaign. And, I knocked on hundreds of doors, and when I got out and talked to the people about local issues, it wasn't so partisan or liberal or progressive or conservative, because when we're talking about local government, we're talking about roads, parks, getting your trash picked up, brush pickup, things like that. When we talk about things like that, I think it resonates with people because those are the issues that will impact them here in local government. So I attribute my being on council to that. And when we're talking about the elections, they're on off years for us. So turnout's not particularly high. So I think before I was elected, because I'm representing District 2 in Fletcher, the election before mine, when that one was up for re-election, the individual wasn't opposed and you only received 67 votes. So it wasn't
Wow.
something that you're right. Yeah, it wasn't something that people were super in tune to here in Fletcher. So when I was able to go out and talk to the people about the issues, I think that's what got me my win, and so why I'm sitting here today.
It was an overwhelming win, right? By 70%.
That's right.
Yeah. So you basically, it sounds like you kind of got out the vote. Would you say was voter turnout unusually high in that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to our past few elections, we can see that voter turnout in Fletcher is increasingly going up. And I think that's because we are having candidates that are going out and asking for the vote and talking about the issues and educating the public. When Mayor Whiteside ran in 2017, he talks about how he knocked on over 900 doors, which is a lot. It was a lot to do for one person.
Step
So
out to over 10% of the population.
you're right. Yeah, it's a lot. So he was able to turn out a lot of votes. Um, my race, we were able to turn out a lot of votes. And when I say a lot of votes, I mean that in comparison to past years, we're talking about 400 to 500 votes, which is incredibly low when we have 5,000 some voters in Fletcher. It's still really low, but it's higher than it was in the past.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, 20-ish% is fairly common, actually,
Yeah,
of people to vote. I think we saw that in the recent New York City mayoral race. Only, I believe, in the low 20% of people voted for the mayor of New York City.
yeah.
So it's not unusual, but was unusual if you were only having people voting by measures of like less than 100 people.
Mhm.
That's pretty shocking. But so all right, now we kind of have established why this is so important. Do you want to talk about your history, your own history? I know you also in your family, I believe your grandmother was a civil rights um activist, and I think your other grandmother was the first Black city bus driver. Is that correct? But that was in Asheville.
Yeah, one of the first. Yeah, so I
Okay.
think my family history is it's incredible sometimes when I sit and think about it. Um, but I guess a little bit about myself. I currently work for my family business, Quality Janitorial Group. So we do janitorial products and janitorial services in Western North Carolina, and that was started in 1990. So we're local business owners. I'm currently sitting as Fletcher Town Councilman, of course. I serve on a couple nonprofit boards. Uh, Not to my family. So yeah, my grandmother, Orling Anderson Graves Simmons. I mean, she's been a pioneer in Western North Carolina. I think in North Carolina in general. So her great son grandfather was an enslaved man in Madison County, and they used him as collateral to start Mars Hill College, which crazy story. Um, and then she ends up being the first person of color to attend Mars Hill College. So
Wow.
she broke the color barrier there, which is incredible. And she was treated horribly there while she was there, and that was something I'm not sure that I would be able to endure. Um, Nevertheless, she persisted, and she's gone on to do incredible things in the community. She started the Asheville Bunker Martin Luther King Association. She's still involved in that. Um, she's received the Order of the Lone Leaf Pine from the governor, so that's something she's super proud of. I mean, she's done incredible things in her life. My mother went on to attend Morris Hill, and so did my sister. I did not attend Mars Hill, but there's a lot of history there, and it's kind of incredible to think that we could go from an enslaved person in my family to where we are today. But we still have a long way to go, nevertheless.
Yeah.
And my other grandmother, Patricia Blakley McCurry, she just passed away a couple years ago, but she was one of the first bus drivers for the city of Asheville. And I think that's incredibly impactful. It may seem super small, but when you're seeing somebody in a role that was inaccessible to them previously, I mean, that's incredible. Like, I couldn't even imagine myself or Mayor Whiteside sitting in where we are right now 20 years ago in Fletcher. 20, 30 years ago in Fletcher. So, I mean, it's incredible. We've come a long way, but a long way to go as well.
Absolutely. So obviously service and a call to service are sort of in your blood, and also just trailblazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about your educational background? I know you're my fellow UNCG alumni.
Yeah, go Spartans.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. So I went through the Asheville City School system. That's where I started. So even though I've lived in Fletcher pretty much my entire life, I still went through the Asheville City School system. I'm incredibly grateful for that and that privilege. Not a lot of people can do that, obviously. Not everybody can do that. So I went to Claxton Elementary, then went to Asheville Middle School, Asheville High School. After I left Asheville High School, I went to UNC Greensboro, go Spartans again. And matter of fact, for my first year in undergrad, I didn't even have a major, and I knew I just wanted to help people somehow. But like, what does that look like? Because I can look like a ton of things just helping people. I mean, we have medical folk that help people. We have some politicians that help people. I mean, that's anywhere, right? We have nonprofit work, but ended up taking a couple poli-sci classes. And I was like, okay, this stuff is pretty interesting. And I was kind of interested in what was going on in the world. I was already kind of paying attention to it. So I decided to make my major political science my sophomore year of college. And then I also ended up picking up a minor that same year in African American and African diaspora studies. And then by the end of my sophomore year, I ended up being a double major in political science and African American and African diaspora studies. And both of those programs were amazing, and they've shaped the way I am right now. And then after that, after I graduated in 2017, I went straight to grad school. So I went to Western Carolina University, go Catamounts as well. And I got my Master of Public Affairs. And for folks that don't know what public affairs is, it's a degree that helps people enter the local government or nonprofit realm and gives them that training for the administrative roles in nonprofit and local government. So I still actually didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just know I wanted to help people, and I thought government was a great avenue to do that. So when I was getting my public affairs degree, my Master of Public Affairs, I was working in the Public Policy Institute with a great professor who I'm very thankful for. And we would work with different organizations to help them achieve some of their goals. So we worked with nonprofit organizations, local government organizations, and we do various projects that they requested to help them accomplish X, Y, Z. And during the summer between my first and second year of grad school, I interned with the city of Hendersonville, which is when I got super in tune to local government, when I'm actually in the building, seeing policy being made, seeing policy be applied by the administrators. And that's when I really started to have the idea that maybe I'll run for office one day, but I kind of put it on the back burner. I was like, I probably not still want to do this administrative work and just apply the policy that the decision makers make. But I saw, and no shade to Hendersonville, of course, because I'm incredibly grateful for them. And I love the city manager. I love the assistant city manager. I love everybody there, and in the governing body as well. But I saw decisions being made, and it's incredibly tough when you're on the administrative side when the decision makers make decisions that the administrators have to apply, and you may not particularly agree with it. And I was only an intern, so I wasn't the one actually out there doing that work and making sure that policy got applied. I was like, holy cow, like if I go into a role like this after I finish, I may be the one applying policy that I may not particularly agree with. And that sat with me for an incredibly long time. And that's what kind of motivated me to get into local government. But yeah, after that, I finished grad school in 2019. It's a super great experience, and I've had so many wonderful educators all the way from Claxton to Western in my life that have truly shaped my view of this world. And I'm super thankful for them and my educational opportunities, because it's certainly a privilege that I've gotten to do that.
So we have it's interesting that you say we have a similar thing going on here. Well, I'm sure everywhere does, where council passes things with no real idea how they're going to implement it, and then they just dump it on the city manager. And like the reparations measure is a great example, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So I just think I wanted to just mention, you know, in the little conversation we had before we started recording, we were kind of talking a little bit about how you can really, in these smaller city government, smaller cities or large towns, you can have quite a significant impact in government. Whereas in bigger cities, it's, you know, to actually move the tide or whatever in any material way, it's so hard. And here in Fletcher, in Asheville, and all these, you know, Hendersonville, you can really do significant things, you know, like real harm reduction that's, you know, in the short term. Because I just want to throw in, you know, some people think very like high level, you know, they're very concerned with national politics, and I think that we have to be concerned with national and international politics. But at the same time, something like the problem that we're having with policing, you know, as you said before we got started, that can be materially affected at the local level.
Right.
And so there's a lot that can be done without having to wait for the huge machine that is the federal government or even the state government to do anything about any given problem. So is there any particular things that you saw or things that you wanted to change in your community that that motivated you to kind of switch from the implementation to the actual policy making role?
Yeah, there was. And I think before I get into that, you know, Black and brown people have historically been excluded from government. So that was one of my main reasons for wanting to run, because I want to make sure that we're representative in our community. And we do have these influence, and we do have these voices. When we do have diverse voices, we have better decision making. When we know that if we have the same type of person sitting on entire councils, we're probably gonna get the same decisions every single time. And I mean, that's me anecdotally speaking, but I would argue that's probably true. Nevertheless, I mean, there's tons of things going on in Henderson County, and I think one of the main things that we're focused on is advocating for a new Henderson County library in Fletcher. I wrote down some data. The Henderson County Library in Fletcher is the most used library in Henderson County, besides the main one that's in downtown Hendersonville, which makes sense. But nevertheless, for that one to be the most used is incredibly impactful when we see so much growth in this northern part of Henderson County. We're talking about Mills River and Fletcher. So in January 2020, we got some data that said that that library had over 80,000 visitors and 85,000 items in circulation and over 9,000 questions answered a year. And that's a lot for the small library in Fletcher. If you haven't visited, please do visit. But please know that they're busting out of the seams, and it's going to take work between the Fletcher Town Council and the Henderson County Commissioners. The counties have specific functions, just like we have specific functions, and libraries just happen to be one of their functions. The town council has put forth their best effort to try to get this done. We have a Heart of Fletcher plan, which is bringing like a downtown presence to Fletcher surrounding town hall. And at that, we have master planned the library, and we've sent an offer for them to have this plot of land to build a library on that's worth about $500,000. And then in the past, we've designated funds and fund balance to try to get this done. So, you know, these small but really large local issues are where it happens at the local government. And like you said, you know, we see the state and the federal government, I mean, they do these big glamorous things, and they are important, and we should advocate for what we believe in with the federal government and the state government. We should also do that at the local level as well, because this is the most direct form of government And we are talking about, I think I said parks, libraries, streets, the tax rate. I mean, these are things that directly impact our constituents, our residents every single day. But it seemingly, and the data probably shows that people aren't really voting in these elections, aren't paying attention to local government. And I think that's unfortunate.
And I think, yes, it is. And it's really leaving something on the table, just going back to, I mean, because just as a local politician can have a lot of influence, so can a constituent.
Right.
So, it's you can really do something. So it is, again, it's leaving a lot on the table, and it's a shame.
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, I think you talked about policing, and I think that's the best example you could use. Because people advocate for how they want policing to look to the federal government and the state government, and they should. Please do that. But if you want some direct change, some quick change, I mean, I would advocate local government, because that's where a lot of most of these police departments are under local government. So we have a Fletcher Police Department. Asheville has an Asheville Police Department. I mean, they can make that change happen if there's a will from the community.
And so let's go into that then. What kind of changes do you advocate for, or do you think might be effective in our localities?
In terms of policing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll speak for Fletcher. I think we just need to be more transparent in Fletcher. I think we need to have the data out there in the open that shows what's going on, so that we can have this advocacy, because there's no will. I don't think it's probably not going to happen, right? So we need to be able to have the data easily accessible, so we can say, hey, Black folk are 5% of the population in Fletcher. And this is just an example, but they're 5% of the population in Fletcher, but they're 25% of the traffic stops, which that's grossly not true. But I mean, for example, if we could have that, I think that we would have the will to make change in Fletcher, at least. I want to speak for Fletcher.
Yeah, we do have that data in Asheville.
Right. And I know the data exists for us too, but I want to make sure it's incredibly accessible to. Right.
Right. And here, I mean, that example that you made was not probably very far off. In Asheville, I believe it was in the year, it was like over maybe a 5-year period in the mid 2010s, and Black people accounted for like approximately 12% of the population in Asheville, but 46% of resisting arrests that were standalone, meaning had no associated charges. Sure. So in other words, you got arrested for, be honest, like for being mouthy or, that kind of thing. It's, so there's a huge disproportionate targeting of the Black population. And I think that those resisting arrest data is particularly interesting because in a lot of cases, a standalone resisting arrest charge, like I said, indicates that, well, you weren't committing a crime, because where's the charge for the crime you were committing? What were you being arrested for that you resisted? Mm-hmm. So you can clearly see something is afoot there. So you want to make the data more transparent. Have you guys had the attrition in your police department? I mean, I'm sure it hasn't been anything like here, but has there been any note in the last year?
No, I think we do have. We've always kind of had vacancies in Fletcher, but I think that's more attributed to better opportunities for policing elsewhere. Like we've had our past police chief go to Henderson County for a better pay or better benefits in his retirement. So I think that's more what it's attributed to in Fletcher rather than.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Do you happen to know what the starting pay is for an officer there, just roughly?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it's 17 or $18 an hour. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's somewhere around there.
Okay, so it's fairly consistent with Asheville. And then um you also, I think this kind of leads us into, let's talk about workforce housing, because if they're only being paid that, and police officers are one of the categories of people that you mention when you talk about workforce housing as a big part of your platform.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a good example of somebody who probably is going to struggle to live in the community that they serve.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times workforce housing or affordable housing gets stigmatized, and that's incredibly unfortunate because what we're missing out on is that a lot of the people that are living in workforce housing or affordable housing, I mean, they are public servants. So we are talking about police officers who need a place to live comfortably. We're not talking about firefighters who also need a place to live comfortably. We're talking about teachers. We're talking about public work staff. We're talking about parks and rec staff. All right. There's a lot of low wage earners, unfortunately, in Western North Carolina, and all those people need a place to live comfortably. It's a complicated problem, right? So I would advocate that we need to be working with different organizations, such as in Henderson County, we have the Housing Assistance Corporation, who's an expert in bringing affordable housing. So I think we need to maybe lean on them, but we also need to do the work too to figure out how we can bring more affordable options, not only to Fletcher, but to the greater Henderson County and greater Fletcher as well, because this isn't just a Fletcher problem. We talked about, I think the recently in one of our council meetings, I think the average home was selling for like 300,000 in Henderson County, which is a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money. I don't think the average person can afford that. The average person that's a native from here, at least. So we need to be able to try to figure out how to work with different organizations, how to um, do the job ourselves to bring about for affordable housing, because this issue it's on the forefront. I mean, we see people getting gentrified out of Asheville and Hendersonville and insert whatever city consistently.
I
So
think in Western North Carolina, it's maybe even uniquely a problem because of climate change and climate refugees, which I guess sounds sort of ridiculous given that we just had the biggest flood that we've ever had before. In, I believe it was, what county is it? That I'm just blanking.
Haywood County.
Haywood County was the worst affected, I
Sure.
believe. But nevertheless, in general, we have a pretty mild climate. We're on high ground and we're on solid rock. So as the climate continues to worsen and change and the coasts become more unlivable, people are flocking here and they bring that coastal money with them. And that's, I think, to your point about that native to the area cannot afford to remain here. And I think part of what's driving that is that climate refugeeism, people coming here, starting bidding wars over some ordinary house, because there's a lack of inventory as well. I know in Asheville, we just flat out don't have enough units per human, no matter how you slice it up, where, money or no money, there's just no house. So
And I think
anyway,
that's true for Henderson County too. But go
yeah.
ahead.
So I was just wondering how you see, how you see the way that the climate stuff is affecting our housing, and what are possible solutions. I mean, how do you envision providing affordable housing? Because people have so many different ideas. Some people think it's just a bubble and it's going to burst. I don't think that's true in our case in Western North Carolina. So it's, I mean, do you have any actual like tactical approaches yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough issue, and I'm not sure that there's one right answer. But I do think we need to figure out solutions that are offering homes or rent and about the what, maybe the 80% area median income, somewhere around there. I,
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can get it down to there, and to be honest, I don't have all the solutions yet, unfortunately, but I think we figure out a way to get it down to there, working with different organizations, different partners. I mean, I think this is going to be a multi-jurisdictional issue. Uh, I think we'll be in a lot better shape.
So in Fletcher, you guys are more rural. So I guess infill is not really so much the issue like it is here. There is more area available for like sprawl. Would that be fair to say?
Um, Maybe. I mean, we're limited by our boundaries as well. I mean, we're growing, we're developing, just like our Heart of Fletcher project. We're trying to do a mixed use development of retail, restaurant, and residential. But nevertheless, I think there is limited space. But I do think there are areas of Henderson County that are maybe better suited, where we see like a Mills River that's very rural and has an massive amount of land to use and potentially purchase. But nevertheless, we need to do our part too. I mean, the town owns some land. We figure out how we can best use that land, serve our residents.
What do you think about city run affordable housing as compared to, the strategy we see here a lot is developers coming in and saying, well, I'll make 20% of my units affordable to the average, or I mean, excuse me, to the 80% or less median income.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's funny that you say that. I think last year we actually had a developer come in on actually want to do that project that you just said, where they wanted 20% of their apartment units to be they wanted 80 to 120% AMI, I believe. And it was in an area that was not zoned for high density units. It was zoned for low density units, so single family homes. And there was some pushback from residents, and there were flyers that went out, and I mean, it stigmatized the project, and I think there were some valid reasons not to do the project. Probably one of the most valid reasons was the condition of the road that it would be built on, which is an absolutely awful condition. And ultimately, we voted no for it. I voted no for it. It probably wasn't the best fit, but nevertheless, I think the larger point that you're talking about is, if we had rezoned it, I mean, there's no guarantee that this is still going to happen when this isn't a government backed, I guess, promise, for lack of a better term.
mm-hmm.
No, this is just a developer coming in and saying that we're going to do XYZ, make this many units affordable or between that AMI. But once, we rezone it, I mean, they could really go back on what they said and not do that. And additionally, what they were saying, assuming that they did do it and we did rezone it, that it would only be for, and I forget how many years, but X amount of years.
Probably 20. That's what
I
I
believe
usually hear.
Yeah, it would only be there for 20 years. So, that's not a solution, right? I think that's a short-term solution. And they could go up on rent at any time. So
yeah.
I would advocate against that.
It's kind of like the 20% affordable units are the crumbs that they throw, to the community so that they can just make a ton of money on their development.
And I think it's like a bone to fetch for governing bodies when we're looking at that and we're saying, oh, well, if we do this, then we'll get some affordable housing, which I think a lot of local government does do some meaningful work and they do want that to happen. But I just don't think that project would have been right for us. And I think there's a lot of unintended consequences that may come from it.
Yeah, we have many similar. I mean, Asheville is constantly in development, and that that project is like a model that just keeps coming and coming and coming, and there's pushback for exactly the same reasons. The rezoning. Also, people are concerned about tree canopy loss, traffic, roads that are not equipped for the development, etc. And I think also people who maybe live in a residential area don't really want a giant 4-story whatever condo building.
Yeah, and we heard that too. I mean, we heard that the road what was that capacity, which it probably is. I would agree with that. We heard increased crime, which I disagree with. We heard that schools would be, I guess, busting out of the seams with new students, which I'm not sure I agree with that one either. But I mean, it got stigmatized, unfortunately.
Right. So, all right, let's go back to the reparations, talking about Asheville, if you're willing to comment on that.
I don't know a whole lot about it, but if you can tell me a little bit.
The reason that I especially thought of it was when you were talking about the way the city manager, like I referred to earlier in the conversation, would just get tasked with implementing things that council passes. And so Asheville City Council passed a measure for reparations for African Americans, formerly enslaved persons, in June of 2020, and basically said, in so many words, the city managers, she'll figure out how to take care of that. We don't have a plan. And they still don't really have a plan. And I feel very sorry for our city manager, Deborah Campbell, because it's such an important and vital task to be given, but she's just really not been given. There's no rule book, there's no playbook, and it seems like she's just kind of out there on her own trying to figure out how to do this, and council just kind of was like, I don't know, you'll figure it out. And the person, Keith Young, who wrote the measure, was not reelected, so he was really probably the one who had the answers, if you will. So they voted it in, then he wasn't reelected, and now it's really like a ship with no driver. So I thought, it might be of interest to you, just as something that, we're right next to you, and it's, it's setting a precedent for sure that could spread. And obviously it's something that would affect, in your case, like your own family, like your grandmother, for example. So I was just wondering if you just had any comments on it in general, just the importance of it, that we're one of maybe 3 places in the country that are even trying to do it, but I don't think we're doing it very well right now. And I don't think people realize how important it is, not just for the reparations themselves to these individuals, but because, as I said to you when we talked the other day, the whole country and parts of the world are watching places like Asheville and Evanston, Illinois, looking at how are they going to do this. And if they don't do it well, they're basically giving people in other municipalities an excuse to not even try, and could also kill the federal efforts as well. So anyway.
Sure. Now, can I just ask a follow-up question? What's it going to look like? I know you said it's not super clear, but are we talking about investment in the community? Are we talking about actually giving folk money? I mean, what is, like,
well, I think there's
things, you know what I mean?
There's definite lack of clarity there, and that's one of the things
that we don't know yet.
And
okay.
I mean, one of the things that is talked about in not just here, but this is like in Evanston, what they're doing is they're tying it to property, home ownership. So you can get the money for to invest in, to buy a home, to fix your home, or I think maybe just to pay down your own mortgage or something like that. But here they've talked, I mean, I've heard about similar things. Also ways to invest in more Black businesses, because we only have about 1% of businesses in Asheville owned by Black people, whereas they're 12% of our population. So, you know, there's people who want a check too, you know. And it's also, I think it's important to clarify, it's not a one and done. You know, you don't give somebody a check for $20,000, whether it's for their house or whatever, and then say, okay, like it's, you know, we're
you don't repair it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be such like an ongoing thing, you know, nationally, locally, everywhere you can possibly attack the problem until we reach some degree of racial equity, I suppose.
Yeah, I hear you. So we're talking about reparations. We're talking about repairing a wrongdoing, right? We all know that chattel slavery was a wrongdoing and that it has lasting impacts today, right? When we talk about the experience that black folk have had in this country, we're talking about what I'm experiencing right now. We're talking about, you know, we talk like segregation was so long ago, but what I just said, I'm like, that's my grandmother that experienced that, right? She's alive. Like I just talked to her today. So that's here. But nevertheless, I think a solution does need to be found, and I'm not sure that I have that right solution, but reparations is definitely a way to repair a wrongdoing that this nation has done, the world has done to black folk, right? So whether it's giving a check for property or investing in Black businesses, whatever it looks like, I mean, we need to find a long-term solution for this, because we've seen where essentially other people, white folk, have had the opportunity to gain wealth for an incredibly long time, incredibly longer than Black folk have, right? You know, we've seen this investment in black folk. We've seen identification of Black folk. We've seen Black bodies die, and a lot of this is because of the remnants of slavery in the United States. So I'm not sure that I have the right solution for it. I don't think it's going to be a solution that comes from local government, from federal government, from state government, and it should, right? It should. And I think you're right. And I think the city of Asheville has an incredibly large stake in this. And to be honest, I'm a big fan of Keith Young. I do know him, and I'm sad that he didn't get reelected, but I'm hoping that the city of Asheville does the right thing. I think it is tough on Deborah Campbell, and I'm incredibly, like I said, I was going to be a local government administrator, so I know the jobs they do, they're hard. So I'm appreciative of her kind of spearheading this, but we do need to make this right, because when the precedent is set, I mean, that's what's going to happen. Likely, I mean, I don't know that for sure, but when the precedent is set, I mean, other municipalities, other local government, other levels of government, they're going to look at this for an example and say, this is what happened here. This is how it worked out. You know, people are happy for right now, but is this a long-term solution? And whether that is or not, I don't know. Or is this repairing the problem? Not even a long-term solution. Is this repairing the problem?
Yeah. That's a good way to frame it. You know, just look at the literal root of the word, and are we actually repairing something that's broken?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, is the percentage of Black people in Fletcher, has it remained fairly consistent, or has it shrunken, or is it projected to shrink or change? Do you know?
I think by percentage, I think it increased a bit with this new census data. I'm not an expert on new census data. I probably should be, so I need to look at it. But I know the Latinx population increased a good deal. I don't think the Black population increased a good deal in Fletcher.
Yeah, so here it's it's shrinking, and the projection is for continued shrinking. I mean, down to probably about 5%, I think, in the next 10 or 15 years, I believe. Or no, I'm sorry, less than that. 2037, I think they project it'll be 5% down from 12. We're already down from, I don't know, 20 or 30 many years back. So I was just wondering if there was any parallel there, but I think here Black people are being driven out by gentrification, just like any low income person is being driven out by gentrification. That obviously also disproportionately affects Black people. So anyways, all right, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I know it's a little bit off topic because it's an Asheville thing. So what other parts of your platform are important that you want to talk about and touch on?
Yeah, for sure. I think one we've already been talking about, so I won't talk about it too much, but equity. I mean, we're talking about fair services and fair policy for all of Fletcher. And we're talking about fairness. We always talk about equality and fairness, but I would argue fairness is the better way to look at it and make sure that we're not disproportionately impacting anybody, that we're not, if we're not disproportionately impacting anybody, and that services are being applied equitably across the spectrum. The Heart of Fletcher, I know I talked about that a little bit, but that is an incredibly marquee project here in Fletcher that's been worked on for way before I was on council. And essentially what it hopes to do is, if you ever driven through Fletcher, it's kind of hard to tell where it begins and ends. But nevertheless, a lot of people have seen our clock tower now, which is almost directly in front of Town Hall. It's just across the train tracks, but right there on our plot of land, we're working with the developer now to try to bring mixed use development to Fletcher, which will be incredibly awesome. Bring more amenities to Fletcher, more residential. Hopefully that's not too outrageous. And additionally, I think it'll help pay for our park system. If you've ever been to Billmore Community Park in Fletcher or off of Howard Gap Road, it's an incredibly used park, and we need to continue supporting our park system. At the peak of COVID, I mean, I would look over there, and I'm glad people were getting outside and staying socially distant and wearing their masks, which I was proud to see happening at our park. But I mean, it appeared as if, and this is an exaggeration, but it appeared as if like every parking spot was filled. So I think that connects directly back to the Heart of Fletcher, where we're going to be able to bring people into Fletcher and help them pay for some of the resources that are being used for people that aren't Fletcher residents. And I'm definitely okay with people not from Fletcher using our resources. I think we're not in government to make money, right? We're here to provide a service. So it's fine with whoever uses them, but I think this will help alleviate some of the burden from strictly Fletcher residents. I think I already talked a bit about transparency. I think one of the things I want to see is performance measures, which is a way to measure how we perform. So it measures services that we provide. So I think police is always an easy example to use, but we can measure how many traffic stops we make and who makes those traffic stops and who's there at the traffic stop, whatever. And we're able to track that data easily. I know that data is already being tracked in our police department, but even past that, we can go to public works. We can track, and we're doing a lot of tracking already in public works, but so we track like brush pickup, we track trash pickup, recycling tonnage, and we can be able to report that effectively to our public. I think it will be able to not only help us as a council, but be able to help the residents of Fletcher see the services that we're providing and how we can better provide those services to our residents.
It sounds like this is your public policy knowledge coming into play, and maybe that you're pushing to advance Fletcher forward, as far as being more data driven, more, more quantitative, as well as qualitative when you're evaluating your own work
and I think the will for that is there, even evident in some of the candidates that we have for Fletcher right now. I think that this truly is a historic election for Fletcher because every single race is opposed. That's never happened in the history of Fletcher, which is crazy. I mean, we had unopposed race after unopposed race after unopposed race. So we had 3 seats up right now: the mayor seat, our District 1 seat, and our District 4 seat, and each one is opposed, and that's monumental to me that we're seeing more participation. But we have candidates like Brandon Olson or Eric Weber who are advocates for trying to be more transparent and using data to be more transparent.
So, sorry, I just when I say I'll edit it out, I'm really talking about myself.
I know I interrupted you as well. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm like a famous thought dropper. So, oh my gosh, what was I going to say? Well, anyway, I guess we'll just move on. Is there anything else that you wanted to specifically touch upon about your platform?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the last thing, which I already kind of talked about, is continuing to support our park system, trying to advocate for more greenways in Fletcher. We did a survey. I was the thing that was most wanted in Fletcher's greenways. I think people love green space. I love green space. I get to walk my dog Nala at the greenways at the park. So hopefully we can continue to advocate for that and try to find solutions to bring more greenways.
And I remembered what I was going to ask you. Where are you at in the stage of the development of that mixed use project in downtown?
Yeah, so we're trying to secure an economic development agreement and a purchase and sell agreement with the developer right now. So we're in the midst of it. We're getting close to selling a property, essentially.
And that's also going to create jobs, I assume.
Right, because there'll be retail, restaurant. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. But nevertheless, when I say I don't know what that looks like, I don't know what retail and what restaurant will be there. But nevertheless, there will be retail and restaurant and will create jobs in Fletcher.
Right, and the building of it as well.
And the building of it, correct, yeah.
How big is it supposed to be? I mean, how many units, how many mixed use spaces?
Yeah, so it's I wish I had the exact number on me, but it'll be at least 1 restaurant, a couple of retail, and a couple of residential. It's an awful answer, I know, but nevertheless, it's coming.
All right, great. So you're basically, the city owns the property and you're working with the developer who's going to buy it and then develop the
correct
structure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what else is encompassed by any efforts to rejuvenate the downtown of Fletcher?
I think that's the main thing, is creating this Heart of Fletcher plan. We have more residential coming. In the next couple of years, we have a developer that's going to bring some residential property that's going to be apartments, townhomes, and villas, I believe they call them. It was a little bit before my time on council, but that'll be coming as well with a ton of units. COVID kind of pushed that one back a little bit, understandably so. A lot of things got pushed back with COVID, and as they should have. But yeah, just bringing them more of that sense to Fletcher. And hopefully there's a master plan to library in there. So hopefully if we can work with county commissioners, that'll be there.
So you guys want to build a new library?
That's correct. Yeah. And I think, and not when we say us, I would say the residents of Fletcher, not just the town council and the residents of Henderson County. Right.
Right. It is interesting that it's the most heavily used library. Do you have any thoughts on why that is?
Well, I think we're one of the fastest growing areas in Henderson County, both Mills River and Fletcher. So we get overlap there. We're near the Buncombe County line, so maybe folk from we're the northernmost municipality in Henderson County. So maybe folk from Buncombe County come over, and when we say that, people might say, oh, well, maybe that's why they shouldn't invest in it. But nevertheless, like I said, we're providing a service, right? We want people to be able to use it no matter where they're from, right? And nevertheless, if people are from Buncombe County or coming and they're impacting the level of service that people from Henderson County are having, then I think that's also a reason why we should continue to advocate for this. And I don't think that's not a good reason not to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, historically, libraries have been sort of the heart of their communities, or one of them, and maybe especially so in more rural areas. So, and I mean, it's kind of just a lot of people think libraries are sort of dying off, but to your point about that, it's just a public service. I mean, I think if people in the community, whether it be exactly from Fletcher or not, or Henderson or not, are utilizing it, then that's a beautiful thing. I mean, people going to the library, I wish we could turn time back and go, here, do that more here. Here, it seems like the downtown library is like mostly a hangout for people to use the computers, but I'll definitely will have to come by there and check out the current library, because it sounds like it's pretty vibrant as compared to what you might see elsewhere. So
yeah, they do lots of programs, computers, access, lots of books, and incredibly helpful staff that I'm thankful for.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, then we're coming to the end of the hour. And so once again, you've been listening to WPVM 103.7 on your dial and globally at WPVMFM.org. Thank you again to Preston Blakley, Fletcher, North Carolina sitting council member and mayoral candidate. Thank you for sitting down with me today to have this conversation about your story and your candidacy and comment on several other things. If you wish, you may find out more information at is it PrestonBlakley.com or org?
It's BlakleyForFletcher.com.
Okay, so if you want, you can find out more information at Blakley, and that's BLAKLEY for Fletcher.com.
Wait. BLAKLE. I think so. BLAK.
Okay, you say it.
All right, I'll say it. For more information, visit BlakleyForFletcher.com. So that's BLAKELY and forFletcher.com. Not the number 4, FOR4. And also follow me on social media at PrestonB_NC on Twitter and Instagram.
All right, awesome. So don't forget that you can view this broadcast archived on WPVM's Facebook page and or website after it airs. So thank you for joining us today, and make sure to stay tuned for future specials featuring candidates from the upcoming political cycle in Asheville and in NC11. In the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing several more of the NC11 congressional candidates, including Democrat Eric Gash and Republicans Eric Batchelor and Rod Honeycutt. Okay, we can cut.